Well, thank you. Thank you, Zach. That was very kind. I'm particularly proud of Zach because he just added had a new addition to his family. So congratulations to you and Mary with that. I was delighted to be able to hold the little guy the other day, and we'll watch him grow up in and around the office. More artwork around the office. No, I really appreciate the opportunity. I thank Brian and Zach for asking me to come and speak. I hope that being first off means that it goes up, it improves from here. So I don't mind setting the bar low for the next presenters. We'll talk about a lot of different things. My original, when I was asked to come and speak, I had a presentation that I've been using, and was delighted to be able to kind of do that. And I think it was maybe just a little bit too much for a morning presentation. And so this is going to be a little lighter, a little more informative, not quite as much education. First of all, let me just say, if you didn't know, today is National Bourbon Day, which is another great reason to celebrate. Thank you. I just realized that myself, and another good reason for me to get to the airport a little bit early this afternoon. So I also just make a couple of remarks. I heard just what I think is spot on from Billy and Jim and several other people, Brian, regarding advocacy. And I just wanted to take 2 minutes and say this. If you do nothing else in this organization, if you're not serving on a committee, if you're not helping with membership and helping with education, please, please, please support advocacy with the legislative efforts, because it really does matter whether you contribute to the PAC nationally. I know Bobby's here, and he's a great resource for that, but also statewide. You know, being involved, we've got to stay involved in those matters. It does, someone said it earlier, it does impact you whether you realize it or not. I'm going to learn how to use this thing. Or not. We'll just start here. So a couple of topics I want to cover today, and we'll kind of go through them as quickly as we can because I have a lot to cover. I asked Michelle to give me the high five sign as soon as she can. Those of you, Tammy Robbins, you know that I tend to go a little bit long. So others have heard me speak, and just it's better to have someone telling me to get off the stage than to keep going. But we'll talk about kind of the topic, which is what we call the silver wave. I'll save that introduction for a few minutes, but we'll talk about the industry and what's happening in terms of our age. I'm sure that I was asked to cover a topic like this because I won't be around for people to scowl at and yell at later for calling us all old, but I am one of them, and I think as an industry, we are certainly in that category of aging. Top 10 challenges that our industry is facing and where that falls in that top 10. I thought it was interesting when we were talking about public records a minute ago. That's in the top 10. You'll see more about that in a moment. Industry consolidation, what's happening as our industry begins to get to that point of, you know, what's my exit strategy? What's the next step for me? How am I going to backfill the talent? Well, all of that's kind of coming to a head with an industry consolidation in terms of mergers and acquisitions. We're seeing an awful lot of that still happening even post-pandemic. Attracting and retaining talent, obviously, is a big part of this discussion. We're going to look at what the next generation wants, which is not exactly what we grew up with and what we came into the business with. So we're making some adjustments there. And then, of course, building a long-term solution. What is the association's role in that? What is your role in that in your specific company? So let's start out with the elephant in the room. And again, don't shoot the messenger. I'm part of the problem now. I've been with Stewart for 21 years and been in the real estate industry for almost 30. And I'll tell you that there are a lot of issues that we face. But one that's lurking and has been lurking for a while, of course, is the fact that the insurance industry as a whole, but particularly our industry, has had an aging workforce. I mean, it's no surprise, of course, that our boomer generation is getting very close to that point of retirement. For those of you that didn't know, and I think most of you did, the boomer generation is roughly 1946 to 1964, which would mean that the youngest boomer is about 60 years old this year. There are 69 million in the United States, which makes up 20% of our total population. So if you figure the youngest is 60 today, we've got about 5 years, and there's going to be a significant shift in terms of our population that are retirement or post-retirement age. And then, of course, workforce declined at 10,000 boomers a day that are turning 65. By 2030, all boomers will be 65 or older, as I mentioned. This will obviously reduce the working age population, ages 18 to 64, from 62% to 57%. That doesn't just impact us in the title insurance business or any insurance business. It impacts us significantly in all industries. So much so that the Congressional Bureau said that the GDP could be impacted by as much as 0.2 percentage points through 2030. So what is the number one industry being impacted by this? Not surprisingly, it's healthcare. Because not only did they already have a shortage, during the pandemic, I don't know if any of you noticed on the news, but there was a crisis with a shortage of healthcare workers there. But that will be compounded so much so in the next 5 years that it's a crisis level situation, because you not only have an existing workforce shortage there, but then you've also got a lot of people moving into long-term health. So healthcare, that sector is number one. Manufacturing is another one. Financial, we look at the accounting business in general. You know, there's a lot of areas that are affected, but by far healthcare is the number one. In the insurance sector, and I'm specifically referring here to the insurance sector as a whole, nearly 400,000 employees are expected to retire, and this comes from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. Nearly 400,000 employees are expected to retire within the next 5 years, so by 2030. So we're part of that, but that industry as a whole has a significant issue that we're going to be facing. So what is the average? So today, based on ALTA surveys, based on about 4,000 who participated in a particular survey conducted by ALTA, we're looking at about 48. So 48 is about the average in our industry. But wait, that's just the average including all title insurance sectors, which would be back office, which would be call centers, which would be underwriters. If we look at it in terms of local, in terms of agencies, the number's a little bit higher. And we'll talk about that in just, I'm going to hold that thought. So if we're 48, those of us that started early in our career, we showed up at work with something like this. If you were fortunate enough to have one, because as I told my AT&T rep the other day when I was buying the 6th device on my account, I said, you realize that all 6 of those Apple phones are still less than the first monthly fee that I used to pay in 1995 on one of these guys. He couldn't believe it. Recognize this? Probably most of us in the room do, maybe a few in the room don't, but this was our method of CRM. This was our CRM tool. We all had one of these. We had to use one of these guys. By the way, all of the things I'm showing you are obsolete now, but this is if you're the average title insurance worker today, you use these devices. This is, I'm so proud of, because that was my first purchase in my career, but how many of you have a teal anything anymore? But in the mid-90s, that was the go-to. And I had a teal F-150 and I loved it. So these are obsolete as well. I mean, I don't know how, I think most of the time when I'm in a Hilton or Marriott, there's one sitting there. I don't see a whole lot of people grabbing them and reading them, but the next generations have no idea what that is. And then, of course, this guy, which was really innovative, but my phone now does more than about 10 of those did in 1995. So let's look at the average agency owner. And this again comes from Bureau of Labor Statistics as well as ALTA. We're looking at about 56. So we've got a little bit of time here in terms of average agency owners. I think it's probably different in some areas of the country than others. But again, it's something that, we've got to be looking at. So let's go back in time. If you were an average agency owner at 56, you were coming into the workplace with one of these guys. And I got to tell you, I still want one of these. This is a 1985. I think it's a Chevy Silverado. But I thought that was incredible. This, if you looked at it, I remember having to use these, but they were real popular a little bit before I came along. You had all of the extensions you had available on your phone. You used one of these. I don't see a whole lot of these anymore, but we still have a couple of agents' offices that have them, just in case. And then this guy. I don't know how many it would take to put what you have on your current iPhone. But a whole lot. And so that was going on in roughly 1985 to 1990. So let's look at some title industry statistics. So this is average across the country. Title professionals earn about $52,000 a year. We do have a gap in another sector, which is the gender gap. And we'll look at this in a completely different presentation one day. I'm not going to get into this one. But currently 38% are male, 62% are female. However, the ladies in the industry are only earning about 84 cents for every dollar that the men earn. And that is changing. That has improved, but that's also a factor of just, a different time and a different generation. So where are we 40 years later? What are the kids now coming to work for the first time in? I doubt they're coming to work with this, but I thought, what the hell, I'm going to put it up there anyway. I got to tell you, that looks nothing like the truck that I wanted or the one that I drove the first time I came to work. And if anybody has that for their first job, I'm in the wrong business. But I thought I'd put that up there. Of course, they're coming to work with one of these, and actually that does everything that they need it to do. And then one last thing, and this is more for kicks and giggles. I've got 4 teenage and college-age daughters, and I hate to tell them that this existed when we started working, but they think it's a new thing, and they're loving every bit of it. But this guy. So I was explaining to him, like, Dad, we've got to have this Stanley. There's like a run on Stanleys at Target or wherever it was, and I'm going, you realize those were red plaid, and they had a cup that would screw off, and you could pour whatever you're drinking. That's been there for a minute, and but I love it. I mean, my wife has one. We've had to kind of clean out the whole cabinet because they won't fit. Most of them are about that big. But I thought, this is illustrating how different things are today. Okay, so let's look at the top 10 challenges in our industry and see kind of where this fits in. All right, when this presentation was done, and a lot of the data that I have here, I did it back in 2022. And so we're right in the heart of the craziness. And so number one on the list back in 2022 was we were understaffed, right? We had an issue with staffing. 50% of respondents said they needed more employees. One of the challenges that we were facing then was the same one we're facing today, fear of the economy. What's going to happen in 2023? Do you remember? We didn't realize 2022 was going to be what it was, and we thought, it's any day now it's going to cut off. Well, sure enough, we kind of went into 2023, and it did, but post-pandemic issues were being faced there. Scarcity of talent in general was a challenge. So that was number one, and I think that's fair in 2022, but I'm not sure it is today. So I put it at number 5. There's a few things you're going to see that I think creep up a little bit, and we'll get more into that. But if any of you disagree with me, I'd love a discussion about it. Let's go into number 2. Number 2 challenge in the industry, stakeholder communication. What do I mean by stakeholder communication? Well, we still have so many analog systems, and we'll talk about it in a moment, but so much data is still requiring a lot of human interaction. We're having trouble with mortgage lenders communicating with us, or stakeholders outside of our business. So I believe this is why this was an issue. Lack of automation, layers of human interaction, But I think even within the last year, we've seen a significant change in that world. Several of the TPS providers have come along and improved that. Some of them have really improved things. So I put that in a number 6. I think it's still an issue, but it's kind of middle of the pack. All right, another big one, RESPA compliant CFPB enforcement. Since 2008, those of us that remember, we've doubled the amount of paperwork we have, maybe even tripled the amount of paperwork that we have at the closing table. All regulatory, and a lot of it for very good reason. But no doubt that has weighed heavy on our industry. It's been a significant challenge. You know, we look at the paperwork. I'm not going to speak at all in terms of politics here, but I think that there's been a quiet period a little bit there, but I think that that's probably going to change. I think that that's probably going to change. We heard a little bit about that earlier in the year. But so I put it at a 4 in terms of top 10. All right, this hit right in the head with what y'all were talking about earlier. Condition of public records. Whether it's the condition of the records, the industry in general, we've got aging books, aging film. This is a significant problem, and it's not just in Arkansas, it's everywhere. With the exception of a few states that really adopted digital technology earlier on, it's something that we're all facing in every state of the country. But one of the things that concerns me most is the political elements within that world. So whether it's a chancellery clerk or a probate judge, we are having political battles over their efforts to create a profit center. And in some states, we're paying $2.50 per page. And you can't tell me that we shouldn't be in an e-recording situation in every county in the country, but in a lot of them we aren't. And the claim is, you know, we don't want to eliminate staff within our probate chancellery clerk office. It'll be political suicide for us to go this direction. I argue the point that we have great vendors here who can not only improve things, but I mean, there's a cost advantage for the consumer, for the taxpayer. This is a big issue, and I think it stems, again, back to advocacy. But I made a big mistake because when I did this presentation, I thought, you know, we're making so many strides, I'm going to put it at a number 10. And after hearing what y'all were talking about and all the issues here, I think it needs to be higher up than that. I think it's a bigger threat to the industry than 10. All right, back to analog data systems. We've made a lot of improvement here, but we're still way behind the curve, whether it's, you know, the examination side of things. You know, part of it is garbage in, garbage out. You still have to go to the record room. In a lot of cases, we've got software that's 20 years old. I got to applaud some of the vendors that have done a lot of things improving that. I think those of you that use Qualia, I think they've made a great, Qualia didn't pay me to say that, but they've made a lot of strides toward better automation, more user-friendly access, fewer keystrokes, all of these things, but boy, we've got a long way to go. We've got a long way to go in that sector. Unstructured PDFs, I mean, this is when, particularly on commercial deals, you know, there's back and forth. We've still got so much work to do versus when you compare our industry to other industries in terms of utilizing technology. And then the mortgage industry. Unfortunately, as I said earlier, it's garbage in, garbage out, but their systems are so behind where they need to be. So these are sort of some things that I think have duplicated efforts, outdated, duplicated keystrokes, that kind of thing. I put that in an 8. All right, the aging workforce, and this really kind of brings it home. 75% of the title workforce are over the age of 40. With the retirement phase really happening now, but even increasing in the next 5 years, we have a critical loss of knowledge. And so how do we keep that knowledge? How do we keep those folks engaged? How do we keep them here in the business? We'll talk about that a little bit more, but I think this is one of the most critical issues within the next 5 years for us to tackle as an industry. Increased pressure from customers. So if you haven't noticed, realtors have become a little more aggressive these days. Our customers we're dealing with have not only become more aggressive, they're bringing a lot of dogs with fleas on them, or deals with fleas on them. We're having to deal with customers' expectations being much higher. I think this is a big issue, particularly with the fact that we are limited, again, by our analog systems, by some other factors. You know, the expectations are getting higher and higher, but our ability to deliver has remained the same, due in large part to technology. 38% of closers said there's not enough time to complete their tasks. You know, pre-approval to funding is 30 days to 10 weeks. I think this is a big issue for us. I put it at a 3. Right now, I think that our customers' expectations and our ability to deliver is a challenge. High cost of technology. Again, I referenced one of the TPS providers a minute ago. I know SoftPro's here. Thank you, SoftPro, for sponsoring and being here. But there is no question that the cost of delivering these or obtaining these products, getting licensed for these products are all very, very high. And it's something that the industry is telling us is a challenge. I think that will change as the development of these software improve. Certainly homegrown solutions are expensive, but I put it at a 9. I think that will improve in time. Okay, challenges in scaling and growing your business. How do you scale if you don't have the bandwidth to dive in and get involved in that? How do you grow your business? How do you market your business if you don't have the bandwidth? So one of the challenges, and the reason that I feel like this needs to be a higher issue, is that we have a lot of technicians who are owners. We have a lot of technicians who like to touch the files, who are involved in the files, and it's very difficult to scale when you've always done it, and now you're facing a challenge with not having as many people in your office. So I think that's an issue. One of the things that I get heavily involved in is the consulting side of things, in terms of, you know, how do we effectively create systems and processes in the office. But it's something I see a lot of. And then number 10 in 2022, and you won't be surprised that I put it number 1, is fraud. And this isn't a fraud topic or fraud discussion. But y'all, if we as an industry don't tackle this one, then the other stuff's not gonna matter. This, I think, is the number 1 threat to the industry. If you're not using some solution, some piece of technology to protect yourself on a transactional basis, pay off, protect, whatever systems you're using, you're making a big mistake. $140,000 is, according to ALTA's report this past week. They came out with a great article talking about what it costs for a fraud claim. $140,000. And by the way, most of your classic traditional E&O carriers are not going to cover that. Even a lot of your bond carriers are not going to cover that. And your insurers are most certainly going to make it a billable claim. So this is an issue that I think our industry has to tackle, and I put it number 1. So then industry consolidation, we'll talk a little bit about this. I mentioned it earlier. As we came out of the pandemic, and as we came out of just that frenzy of work, you know, there was a lot of uncertainty of where the market was headed. I know we were hopeful that inflation would be under control and that we would begin to see the Fed make some good decisions there. That hasn't happened yet. I think June, when we were looking at this year, we were hoping June would be the month. That didn't happen. We heard some good news this week, maybe that things are moving in that direction, but I think it's probably going to be September, October at the earliest, and then hopefully we'll see improvement there. But market conditions are definitely a big challenge. But I think one of the things that I go back to advocacy on is the regulatory headwinds, and I know David Towns is going to talk about this later, so I don't want to spoil his discussion at all. But whether it's the CFPB, the Biden Homeownership Plan, or AOLs, Attorney Opinion Letters, there are certainly some real lurking attacks on the industry that we've got to be aware of. And so you combine the market headwinds with a lot of these regulatory pressures, and it creates just a reason that a lot of our folks within that 5-year exit strategy saying, you know, I'm done. I'm ready to move on. I'm ready to get out of this business. I can't tell you how many phone calls I get from agents, Bobby, you probably do too, where it's like, hey, you know, I'm kind of looking to that point in my career. I want to be thinking, you know, I want to spend more time on the lake. I want to be, you know, down at the beach at our condo, whatever. But when you have these conditions, it's going to create more of a consolidation. And the bigger title companies are getting bigger. The companies who have the ability to make those acquisitions now are certainly taking advantage of it, at least from my perspective. So let's talk a little bit about what I started to present and was politely told, let's not get quite as much in the weeds on an education side. So I'm working on a project. I'm about 20,000 words into a project that I've been working on several years. And I'm really excited about it. But it's all about, you know, sort of from technician to CEO. How did our industry get to where it is? So none of us, and you've heard this so many times, none of us got into this business on purpose. It was either something that we did as a result of a family member. It was either something we did because, you know, we needed a job and we really didn't know what this business was, and then we stayed here. But the vast majority of the practitioners in the title insurance space are technicians at heart. At one point or another, you were on the cold basement floor of a courthouse or a record room doing research. And for that reason, that's your heart. That's what you enjoy. That's what we enjoy as title professionals. The challenge with that, though, is that if you're a technician, it's very difficult to rise out of that, and there are several exceptions in the room, but to rise out of that and get to that management level. Okay, now I can delegate. Now I can delegate. And so what happens in our industry a lot of times is you have enormous owner fatigue because there is no good systems and procedures for you to be able to take a vacation. And I look out. I was in Houston this past week and was talking with some folks, and they're like, "Yeah, I just need a vacation." And I think we all kind of experienced that at one point or another. But as an industry, the title insurance businesses, which 75% are under 5 employees, or around 5 employees, our industry doesn't do a good job of scaling and of creating systems and procedures to be able to allow them to do that. It's said that every business, whether it's a title insurance business or really, frankly, any other business, is made up of 3 personalities. You've got the technician, the manager, and the entrepreneur. It's very rare that I've ever seen someone possess 2 of those, let alone all 3 personalities. But those are always in conflict. And so one of the things that I think is driving this industry consolidation is folks are looking for ways to be able to come home and not bring all of that stress and frustration. And it's a tough challenge, and that's a whole other topic for discussion. I promised I wasn't getting into that. So, industry consolidation, M&A activities remains strong. Between 2020 and 2022, over 25% of companies were either sold or merged within the title insurance space. A lot of those were either, and this includes a lot of subsidiaries, so that number could be adjusted a little bit down, but there were many businesses, agencies that were sold or merged during those 2 years. We're still seeing a lot of them, not as many, but one of the things that I think is critical in that discussion is when we look at acquisitions, for someone considering putting themselves on the market for being acquired, having that second line of stakeholder in the office is so important. And we'll talk a little bit more about succession planning, but if you don't already have your succession planning in place, if you don't have that layer of second line management, you must do that in order to position yourself to be in the best possible position to be acquired. Whether it's 2 years out, 5 years out, 10 years out, you need to be thinking about that. And that's usually in these acquisitions, that's the deal that's going to kill it, is who's going to take over once I'm gone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about post-pandemic attracting and retaining talent. A few statements from Diane Toom. I thought these were interesting. She said, this is just really about attracting talent to our industry. She said, this is a top issue. This is what keeps people up at night, and the pandemic has only made things worse. We first launched our talent committee about 15 years ago, and it's still working on the issue. Almost 21% of our workforce is within 10 years of retirement. It won't surprise you, that statement was 2020. So here we are almost 5 years later, 4 years later, and it's only getting worse. She said there's a huge opportunity for folks who are technologically savvy to step into our industry. That statement was made in 2021. So it's been an issue. Our Land Title Association knows it's an issue, but what's keeping us from kind of getting the ball moving toward a solution? Part of it is understanding the next generation. And this is kind of what I was teasing about a little bit earlier. We are still not a very attractive industry to come to if you're, bebopping out of college. It's kind of like my daughter's still, I've got one graduating college in July. I've got one headed to Ole Miss in August. And both of them are sort of that Gen Z, I think. I think that's a Gen Z time frame. And it's like, Dad, I don't even know what you do, really. But I try to explain it, and they're like, what's insurance? And one of the issues here is that only 44% of millennials care or even understand what insurance is. Probably because they either don't own a home, have never purchased a home, they're still living maybe in their, forgive me, millennials in the room, they may still be living in their parents' basement. I don't know. But the point is there's a big gap in understanding what insurance is and why they need it and and we just don't do a good job presenting it, I think, partly. But 8 out of 10 millennials have admitted having very little knowledge about the subject in general. But what we do know is that when they do go looking for a career, they want flexibility and work-life balance. That is a big ticket item. And those of you that are falling in that category, you're definitely nodding with me right now. But work-life balance is big. It did not mean as much to me, right? What meant a lot to me was I can get 70 to 80 hours and get paid for that and sock it away and maybe find time for my family later. Now we're dealing with a generation that's saying, no. I want to have time that I can go and exercise. I need time to spend with my friend. I want to go to a concert. I want to be able to do the things that I enjoy. And so we as an industry, I think, need to start grappling with what does it look like to attract this talent into our business. One of the things that our keynote will be talking about, and I'm so glad she's going to be here. Tracy is amazing, and I hope, like I said, you're starting low. The bar is very low, and it gets better as the day goes on. But she does an amazing job presenting the topic of AI. And so fasten your seatbelts. But I'm not going to talk about AI too much, but I will say this. Technology is the future of attracting the next generation. It is. And if we're not there, whether it's through the title production systems, whether it's through incorporating some of the technology that's readily available, and AI is one of those things, then we're gonna have a tough time attracting the talent. So I want to show you something. I didn't really plan on this, and then I thought I would bring it in anyway. So I'm learning this AI thing, but my wife for my birthday, she buys me this really nice pair of Ray-Bans. How many of you know what I'm about to show, like kind of have an idea what I'm about to show you? There's a few of you that do. So she buys me these Ray-Bans. I'm like, well, those are really cute. They're kind of heavy. I mean, they're nice, but, thank you. She's like, oh, no, those aren't just any Ray-Bans. Check it out. So right now, I'm holding what used to be my cell phone, what is capable of doing everything your cell phone's capable of doing. So I put these on, right, and they look like regular old Ray-Bans. But if I say, hey, Meta, start recording. Well, now I'm recording everybody in the room. Don't worry, I'll delete it. Hey, Meta, take a picture. She takes a picture. And by the way, while I'm doing this, she's whispering in my ear. I can say, hey, Meta, what's the weather? Now she's telling me what's going on in Rogers, Arkansas. It's incredible. But here's where it gets really scary. I was driving down the interstate and I said, hey, Meta, tell me what is that vehicle in front of me? She says, that's a white Ford F-150 from 2015. It's incredible, and it's kind of scary, but like the point is, I'm stuck in that teal F-150, and I'm now being given tools that our kids and this generation of workforce are expecting. They're expecting it. You can look at a document. It's crazy. Go to a restaurant, and there's maybe Italian restaurant or whatever. These have the ability to actually decipher what it says and summarize it for you. It's crazy. So I do encourage you to pay attention later, because that's it's going to be a big factor. So a couple of things that we need to be doing. We need to leverage technology and social media to attract younger generations. They're really big. It's not just TikTok. They're really big on LinkedIn. And so if you're looking for talent, that's an area where they're spending a lot of their time. And if you're not already kind of looking at the LinkedIn world, you ought to be. Mobile apps, digital tools, like I said, their life is in the palm of their hand. So if there's a way that you can integrate some of their work there, that's going to be attractive to them. I depend on our technology folks to start getting us in that direction. Utilizing social media for recruitment, I already mentioned that. So we'll look at a couple of the things that millennials in particular are looking for. The Generation Z is still too early to tell. I have a feeling it's going to be a lot of parties and work from home, but millennials, they're telling us that they want growth and upward mobility. They want growth and upward mobility. They want a lot of vacation time. They want remote work capabilities, which is great because we had to figure that out a few years ago, right? So we know we're capable of it, but we need to start recruiting more in that category. Is it possible for us to do more with them working from home? That's kind of important to them. Competitive health and benefits obviously is important to everybody, but millennials tell us that that's kind of a high topic. Pet friendly? Are we pet friendly? I don't know. I know in our Birmingham office, I show up every so often, and there's a pet in there, right? So that's cool. But we need to be thinking about what's attracting a millennial to bring. Can they bring Fido? I don't know. If you're allergic to cats, that could be an HR problem. Happy hours. So they like engaging with each other. They want more engagement on the team. And so if there's opportunities for you to have folks gather, and go bowling, go to Topgolf, try to incorporate some of that into your workplace. Obviously, technology, laptops, cell phones, tablets. I mean, that's kind of a low bar. We know that they love their technology, but they need to be able to do everything on it. That's expected. Compensation. These kids are savvy. I mean, they're pretty savvy when it comes to the negotiating table. But again, I think that I find that the dollars are not as important as the experiences and opportunities for growth. I'm not saying they're not, but it's a little different. So is the standard compensation package enough for recruiting young people? So if you're using the same comp package that you used to, it's probably not going to work as much these days. One of the things that we're seeing more of is hiring from outside the industry in general. Guys, we've become a revolving door in terms of stealing employees from one agency to another, one title company to another. I mean, I think we're having to see and we're having to move toward recruiting from outside the industry and training people up. So one of the things that I'm going to kind of camp out on this slide for a while, because this is really this is my call to action for y'all. But not only do we need to be looking outside of our industry, we need to be thinking about how do we train the next generation in our industry. So I've talked a lot about the boogeyman, that the monster under the bed of what's happening in the next 5 years. How do we overcome that? How do we position ourselves? As Bobby and Tammy and several other people that are in the Southeast Land Title Association know, in 2018, we started an initiative. We had a little bit of a stumble there along the pandemic years, but we started an initiative for a title institute. And I was speaking to Brian last night, and I mentioned I was going to talk about it, but I really would encourage the association to consider pursuing a certificate program, not just a title school. Title schools are great. You can get hours. It's a great way for people to mingle. But really focusing on having a certificate program where young people, or anybody for that matter, coming into the industry can go through a series of courses that would result in them being able to actually have a certificate, something akin to an associate's degree. So we did this in Alabama as kind of a pilot, and we started working with one of the local junior colleges. And they were ecstatic. They're like, look, we'll provide the facility, we'll provide the ability for, coordinating your curriculum. We need help, they said, with your adjunct professors. So we need people to come in and help us teach this stuff. But if you can provide the professors, then it could be a program for maybe one semester, and then maybe another semester down the road. But what we started looking at was two really pillars of this Title Institute. One being title examination, and underwriting. So that's really fundamental. And that's so different from the settlement side of things. So we started there. We worked with ALTA, and I would encourage those of you on the board to reach out to ALTA. We've got some great contacts there. They allowed us to license their Title 101 program in the Title Association and actually kind of make it our own from a state level. Gina Matthews is kind of carrying the torch on that. Zach Atwood is involved in it. What we need to do as an industry, though, is get real intentional about making it exciting, where we can have a certificate that then you could take to any title company, and the expectation is the basics of title exam and underwriting. And then we move into settlement and closing. So that's kind of that's one of those things that I would just encourage you all to think about in Arkansas. Mentorship. If you don't already have a mentorship program in your title agency, please start now. I mean, this is something that the younger generation is saying they want. And it's the only way we can survive as an industry is if we have a good mentorship program within the title companies. Capturing that knowledge, pairing up a young employee with someone who's been around and understands the business, but not just kind of loosely. Make it intentional. Have a program. Zach has done a great job with this in our organization and kind of leads the charge there. But I'm excited to see those popping up, and I would encourage you to go there. Internships. If any of you have questions about that, we certainly have some programs. I know most of the companies, the large companies in the room, have them. But work with your local universities and paralegal schools and associates programs and create an internship program. It's a great way to bring some young people in. I think this is the answer to the question is, how do we attract and retain talent? Well, first we've got to go out and present ourselves. So let's get in front of these junior colleges and universities and talk about our industry and bring them over. We've got a long way to go. I think unfortunately, we got a short amount of time to get there. Do I have any questions? Anybody want to talk about any of the topics? By the way, I apologize for going so quickly. I was a little concerned about time, but it looks like I'm in good shape. Again, I appreciate it. I would encourage you to work with neighboring title associations. I know Texas and the Southeast Land Title Association. Florida in particular has done a great job with their Title Institute program. So I encourage you to look into that as well. Thank you so much for having me.